such a pleasure to welcome back into the program. And I think he's fired up today. He's fired up all the time, but I think extra fired up today. Jim Bottrell is here. He is the founder of the Jim Bottrell Real Estate Team. Imagine that. You can find him online. Jim has thebuyers.com. He's with us every month to check in on the real estate market, but also just to check in on what in the heck is going on around this country. Jim, thanks so much for being here. Welcome back to the Inland Empire Answer.
Thanks for having me, and yeah, I'm fired up today.
All right, so let's go, because we are very close to Election Day, and we know that there are going to be some big decisions to be made. Now, clearly, we are all following who's going to be president, but there are other ballot measures that I think are probably even more important than who will be our next president. What are you thinking about these ballot measures that we need to consider?
Well, of course, most all ballot measures are important. I don't think they're more important than who's president, but I'll disagree with you on that one. First time we've ever disagreed. Most of all ballot measures are important, and most all ballot measures, and this is my opinion, I told you a little fired up today, Jennifer, they're either trying to take money from us, release criminals back onto the streets, or restrict good, honest Americans' liberties and freedoms. And for me, when it comes to this stuff, I learned a lot of lessons from my parents. My dad, who was a former United States Marine and retired LAPD police officer, he always said, the government's job is to protect the borders and deliver the mail. Yep. Outside of that, get the hell out of our lives.
Amen. Amen. Your dad's a wise man.
Oh, yeah. And then my mom used to say, when it comes to this, voting and stuff, she says, son, you always vote no on any ballot measure that asks for money. They will always lie about what it's actually for. And the way they get people to vote yes for giving the politicians more money is to say that the money's for the schools, but it never is. Yep. It just goes in the general fund. In the next election, those same politicians will ask for more money. And of course, again, it's for the schools, but it never gets to schools.
It is so right. I always say they try to guilt you. And so they either try to leverage you, right? They either say you have to pay for schools, or we have to fix the homeless problem, or they guilt you into things. Well, if you like to breathe clean air, or if you like birds, then you got to vote for this. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous, but it's always about more money. So great words of wisdom from your parents. What are you watching? What specifically on the upcoming ballot should people know about certain measures that you're keeping an eye on?
Well, again, this is just my opinion, but since you asked, first, vote no on anything that asks for money. Second, and probably more importantly, read the actual measure, not just the title. I learned a long time ago, and I say this all the time. Anytime the government names something, that's exactly what it's not.
Yes.
Take, for instance, the Inflation Reduction Act, for an example.
Yeah, or the Safe Neighborhoods Act. Remember Prop 47? Now we're trying to repeal that, or amend it at least. All right, so you're right about the Inflation Reduction Act. That should have been named the Inflation Creation Act, clearly, because that's what we've all seen. That's what it's done. Is there anything on the upcoming ballot that deals with real estate that you can talk about?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. There are two statewide ballot measures that I'd say definitely vote no on. Prop 5, the title for this piece of work is, quote, allows local bonds for affordable housing and public infrastructure with a 55% voter approval. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah, always on the surface, but tell us what it really does.
Yeah, well, Prop 5 is a huge no. Prop 5 guts Proposition 13 and makes it easier for politicians to raise taxes because it actually lowers the threshold to increase taxes from the current law, which is stated at a 2/3 vote or 66.6%, down to a 55% vote. So this is just another effort to make it easier to get Prop 13 and make it easier for politicians to raise taxes. And we are already the most heavily taxed state in the union. I personally would rather force the politicians to balance a budget than to reach into our pockets any further.
Amen. And I've heard that it goes on into perpetuity, by the way. This is just a forever thing, which is not what you want. So for those people who have heard about Prop 13, we are always trying to protect it. The Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association does just that. Tell us what Prop 13 does, what it means to homeowners.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who don't know what it is. So Prop 13 was passed in 1978, and it limits the property taxes reassessment on homes. So when you own a home, you pay property taxes. That's fine. However, under Prop 13, your property taxes can only be increased 2% per year based on the price of the home when you originally bought it. So that's 2% increase. That 2% increase is a sustainable increase in the amount of property taxes paid by the owner, and it does not allow the state or politicians to reassess your property every year at the current market value of your home. It limits the increase to just 2% per year, regardless of what the real estate market did that year. So let's talk about what happens if Prop 13 goes away, which California politicians have been trying to kill at every single election. Each election, the politicians come up with a new, clever way to disguise what they're doing. So imagine what happens if Prop 13 gets overturned, like the politicians have been trying to do in a very sneaky way in every single ballot that I can remember. So we'll do a scenario. Scenario is Grandpa and Granny. They're on a fixed retirement income, and currently they can afford to pay the property taxes on their home that they've lived in for, let's say, 20 or 30 years because their property taxes, which is protected by Prop 13, is based off the original purchase price from when they bought that home 20 or 30 years ago. That slow, steady increase of just 2% per year in the property taxes they pay is affordable only due to Prop 13 protections. However, if Prop 13 goes away, Grandpa and Granny, they're not going to be able to afford the property taxes in their home anymore because their home will be reassessed and taxed at today's value of that home, which would be a massive increase in the property taxes that Grandpa and Granny would have to pay. So here's the result, and this really will happen. Grandpa and Granny can no longer afford to live in their home that they have lived in for 20 of 30 years because of property taxes becoming unaffordable. Could you imagine that? Elderly people being forced out of their own homes because of taxes. And for what? So the government can spend $117 billion on a high-speed railway to nowhere? Or the government can give money to fully capable people who choose not to work, and somehow that's okay? The attempts to eliminate Prop 13 is one of the most massive money grabs in history, all because California politicians seem to have no moral limits on how much of somebody else's money they feel they need to spend or give away. So in summary, it's a big no on Prop 5 and anything that's a threat to Prop 13, just a huge no. Prop 13 is a worthy proposition that has protected citizens from politicians since 1978.
That's right. And it will obviously be so hard, not just on people who have inherited family homes, of course, and then people who are older, who are on that fixed income that can't afford to pay current value. They're paying their property taxes based on the cost of their home. Jim, it's so important to protect this. It will cause a massive problem. And you're right. Also, the government can continue to fill their coffers with lots of your money, and they're going to spend it in ridiculous ways. I just saw a story that says that in the state of California, we pay $57,000 and change for every homeless person in the state. It is just unreal. All right.
I thought it was a lot more than that.
I know. Well, still, when you think about it, and maybe, who knows what the number really is, because this doesn't include all the local sales taxes. This is just from a state level. It's really wild. All right. Any other propositions? Because I think there are a few that we need to be aware of. What else are you watching?
Yep. All right. Prop 33. That's another huge no. The title for this piece of work is titled, quote, expands local government authority to enact rent control on residential property.
Right.
So when you read it, you'll learn that it gives the politicians the ability to control rents without limits. So who knows what they'll do with this kind of power? Free market be damned. And again, this goes back to what my dad said. Government's job is protect the borders, deliver the mail, stay the hell out of our lives.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. So can you tell us why this one is bad on the surface? Because a lot of people say that rent control is good. But I read this and I said, why should I give the government more oversight into or more interaction with like guest units I might put on my own property, essentially? Take us through the details of Prop 33.
Okay. So Prop 33 suggests that rent control is the answer.
Yeah.
It's not. This, along with other terrible California anti-business, anti-investment laws like it, this will cause builders of affordable housing projects to take their investment capital to other states where it's easier to build, cheaper to build, and they have a greater expectation of a profit on their investment dollars. Politicians, who I'm sure have signed the back of many paychecks but never the front of one, if you know what I mean, they're not thinking this through. They're not thinking this through. Just like they didn't think through the $20 per hour minimum wage for fast food workers that cost tens of thousands of jobs to be lost. This Proposition 33 will cause fewer rental properties to be available. fewer people will want to own investment properties, and fewer builders will invest into building housing that is designed to be affordable, like apartment complexes. Investors will simply take their money elsewhere to a state where they don't have to deal with these garbage rules. So the result of Prop 33 will be even greater shortage of rentals. Jennifer, the free market's the best market. Mm-hmm. We have seen so many examples of what happens when a government messes with free market, and it never works.
Yeah, and what about the people and businesses that already own investment properties? How would that impact them?
Great question, and I can answer that one because I'm personally one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the real estate industry, but I also own real estate investment properties. Some of those properties are in San Diego, where rent control laws already exist, and this is what happens. For every action the government takes, there is an equal and opposite reaction from businesses. And we recently saw that with the fast food restaurants eliminating jobs and instead installing kiosks and ordering apps, which I hate, but I have no option to use because there's nobody behind the counter anymore. So here's how rent control plays out. Rent control laws guarantee that the landlord will raise the rent by the maximum allowed amount every single year, because if they do not, they can never catch up. San Diego, for example, has some rent control laws. Then I ran into a situation once where I did not raise the rent on one of my tenants when they renewed their lease. I could have raised them $200 per month when they renewed, but I didn't. And here's the lesson that I learned that all investors will learn pretty quick. Now, since I didn't raise it that $200, I can never catch up, because I'm restricted by rent control laws for future rent increases. I will forever be behind $200 per month every month on that property. I can't catch up. So me not raising the rent was a mistake that cost me personally $2,400 a year every single year. I learned that lesson. Now my reaction to rent control law is that every single rental property that I own gets raised by the maximum amount every single renewal. Warranted or not, the rents are getting raised. The rent control laws give me no choice. Landlords only need to learn this lesson one time like I did, and they'll never make the mistake again. And that's why rent controls don't work. They will actually raise rents that people pay.
What about the renters? Doesn't locking into a lower rate actually help them out?
Here's where I'm going to get controversial.
Okay.
On the surface, get ready.
I'm ready.
On the surface, it sounds great for them, but the answer is no. In fact, it's absolutely not. So let's play it out. Rent controls keep poor people poor. Yeah, I said that. Mm-hmm. Rent controls keep poor people poor. That's because 80% of global wealth is held in the ownership of real estate. It's held in real estate. And I don't personally know a single wealthy person that is a renter.
Right.
I've never met one in my whole life, and I'm in the real estate business, so I meet a lot of people. So you have to ask yourself, why is that? Why aren't renters wealthy? Well, I'll tell you why. Because in order to be wealthy, you have to invest in yourself. So, Jennifer, would you agree? In order to become wealthy, you have to invest in yourself?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And by the way, very wise words from you, Jim Bottrell.
In my moments. All right, so let me ask you this question. When you pay rent, are you investing in yourself or are you investing in your landlord?
It's not me. It goes straight to the landlord.
That's right. You're investing in your landlord. So let's go back to the rent control stuff. By keeping rents down, people will be more likely to remain renters, which means they'll be more likely to remain poor. They're more likely to never own the appreciating asset that is a home. They're more likely to never experience the massive tax deductions that owning a home comes with. They're more likely to have their cost of housing increase every single year for their entire lives versus having a fixed cost of living for just 30 years, which then goes to zero once the mortgage is paid off. So imagine having no mortgage payment in your golden years. Contrast that with paying an ever-increasing rent payment with no end through your golden years. Could you imagine paying rent with your Social Security check?
Amazing.
And lastly, terrifying. Not amazing, terrifying.
Yeah.
And lastly, renters are more likely to have nothing to leave their kids when they leave this earth, as we all will someday. And for those of us that are parents, being able to give our kids advantages in life, maybe advantages that maybe we didn't have ourselves, that is a parent's highest goal. Yeah. Owning a home achieves that. Renting a home does not.
I have never really considered it that way. And I hear it in your voice, Jim. I never realized how much you dislike the concept of renting.
I have tremendous amount of contempt for the concept of renting. It's awful. There are so many good things that come with owning a home and so many bad things that come from renting. Now, I just touched the surface on wealth that we just talked about, but I could go on talking about, there's statistics about all kinds of things. And let's just talk about the kids again. The statistics clearly show that children that grow up in rented homes versus those that grow up in owned homes, their contrasts in life are shocking. And the list goes on, not just kids in finances.
Wow, that's a great topic. We should talk about that next time. But since the election is coming up, what other ballot measures would you like to discuss? Because there are lots, even local races as well.
Yeah, well, let's just talk about, I talked about the two state ones, 5 and 33, which are both no, by the way. Riverside, answers usually in Riverside. Let's talk about the Riverside-specific ballot measures. My recommendation, you do your own, but my recommendation is to vote no on the following propositions. Now, get ready for this.
Okay.
I'm voting no on C, 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 E, H, K, O, R, S, T, U, V, and X, because every one of those is a property tax hike. So I'm basically voting no on the alphabet.
I was going to say, you're against the alphabet.
I'm against the alphabet, anti-alphabet. But I encourage every one of you out there listening to read the actual measure, not just the title, because remember what I said earlier. Anytime a politician names something, that's exactly what it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So you are fired up and filled with great wisdom. And Jim Bottrell, I'm taking all of your advice. These ballot initiatives, they are tricky. They are meant to tax us all out of California. And that's what's happening. We're already seeing it. Now, if you want to talk to Jim Bottrell and his team, if you've got a home to sell, if you're looking for something to buy, jimhasthebuyers.com is the place to go. Jimhasthebuyers.com, 800-498-SOLD, 800-498-SOLD, or jimhasthebuyers.com. Jim Bottrell, founder of the Jim Bottrell Real Estate Team. Thanks so much for being with us.